from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo, and it is Monday. Welcome to the program. Give us a call, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833, the number 4, my last name, V-A-L-D-E-S. Looking forward to speaking with you guys throughout the evening tonight. And today's Monday. That means yesterday was Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to everybody out there. Happy belated Father's Day. I hope you had a great time. I know I did. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But there's, of course, there's plenty of things to talk about. But the main thing I noticed in the news today was how you had a visit from the Secretary of State to Asia, and yet the number one story on every news site had something to do with somebody I like to call El Trompito, Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States, El Presidente, Donald J. Trump. And I was wondering to myself, why is it that Donaldus Magnus is the headline everywhere you go when he didn't do anything new, right? He didn't do anything new that he didn't do on Thursday or Wednesday when I think he spoke on Tuesday, right? And then he gave a follow-up with a video on Wednesday. But I'm beside myself. And the reason I'm beside myself is because I realize they love to report on Trump because it's true. You know, he says, look, when I come on, they get the best ratings. They do. They really do. But it goes beyond that for me, right? I think it goes beyond that because we have a job to do. And look, I'm not a reporter. I'm not a journalist. I'm not here to tell you what the news is. I share the news with you because I reflect on it and give commentary on it and give my opinion and analysis on it. But I'm not here to make news. And there are people that do have that job. And you would think that they would take other things into consideration, right? There was a very bloody weekend, Father's Day weekend. There's lots of shootings in many different places. And it just is one of those things. Cut number 14. It's one of those things that I feel like, you know, we have to pay attention to everything, right? Reagan called on us to be informed patriots. But how can we be informed patriots if the news is all focused on Donald Trump and saying all sorts of things that, are contrary to what Donald Trump is saying, right? And thank God he gets so much coverage because, you know, it's fascinating. Look, I'm sure if you looked hard enough, and you probably wouldn't have to look that far, you'd find a bunch of people that don't like me, right? So just imagine, I'm just a lowly radio host now on national airwaves, used to be out of New York City, and I have enemies, right? I have adversaries, critics. Just imagine if you were El Trompito, a big developer, a big media personality, eventually became president of the United States. Of course, he's going to have adversaries, especially when you know his style, right? And Trump's style is one where he would give people a chance and play people against each other like he did in The Apprentice. And eventually he would say, look, so-and-so, you're terrific, you're smart, you're this, you're that, you're going to have a brilliant future, but you're fired. And he would fire people in the most eloquent way, and they'd usually thank him because they learned so much from working alongside him, and the advice was priceless. But my point is, you build up a list of people that don't like you. And similarly, in the White House, there were some people that didn't work with Trump anymore. And honestly speaking, I think he was more gracious there because he didn't want to look political, so he didn't fire people, but he kind of let nature take its course. And now today, you've got everybody that's a former disgruntled person from the White House, from the administration. Every last one of these people are the expert witness, if you will, right? You've got Attorney General Bill Barr, right? Him and Bill Barr saw eye to eye until they didn't. And now he is the utmost expert on everything. They have him on every channel that opposes Trump. It's just, to me, it's kind of laughable. Like, why not? Just for time and for just time and again, bring somebody else that disagrees. If you've listened to this program for any amount of time, I've invited so many people onto this program, and they have not honored my request, my invitation to come on this program. It's not like I have a line of liberals and progressives that want to come on and share their side of the story. It just isn't the case. That's why I have so much audio, and I make sure, painstakingly make sure, that I don't give you 10 seconds, 12 seconds. I give you a minute and a half to give you the full context of what they're saying so that their side is told, because I want you to hear what they have to say. Because I think it's important that you hear what they have to say, right? People like Joe El Baboso Biden, or the other casts of characters that, we don't hear too much from Nancy La Bruja Pelosi. But every now and again, we hear from AOC All Out Crazy, my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens. And another person we're going to hear from now is Rashida Jones. I've got her on my cut list, cut number 14. She is the president of MSNBC. And in an interview with Axios today, she says that she would put Trump on her television network. Now, I was expecting, honestly, for her to say, absolutely not. This man is dangerous. He's a threat to democracy. He's this, that. You know what? She wants those ratings, too. Everybody wants a piece of El Trompito because you know what? That's how you get good ratings. You bring on people that disagree with you and you have a conversation, whether you agree or disagree. And that's why I always invite those people. And we've had some that have actually come on board, and we've had those discussions. And I'm happy to have them because I think they're important. But listen to Rashida Jones, president of MSNBC with Axios. Listen to this.
So I have a couple thoughts there. One, we're having conversations with all of the candidates across our entire news group about how to bring their point of view to the audience. There are lots of ways to do that, whether it's a live interview, whether it's a tape interview, whether it's a town hall, whether it's a debate. We still have 505 days left until Election Day.
Counting down each day.
Not that I'm counting. And I think there are many ways that you can approach that. I don't know that a town hall tomorrow is something that our audience is looking for, or any audience. But as you look at the next 505 days, I think you'll see a lot of that across the portfolio.
But if Trump came to you specifically and says, I want to be on your air to do it, would you say yes?
Would I say yes to that? It would be a conversation. I think you have to put parameters about how to control the environment.
Yeah.
So you have to notice how she says, listen, the answer is yes. She's going to take Trump, and they're going to want to try and control his speech. They don't believe in free speech. We know that. They believe in speech that they like. But you know what? Even if they have to let him talk about whatever he wants to talk about, and insulting them right to their face when he says, you're fake news, and points to all of their cameras, which I think is pretty funny when he does it, they're going to take it because they know that they're going to blow away those ratings, right? They had one big week last week, and where they took the 8 p.m. slot because of the absence of Tucker Carlson. And I guess Newsmax had been really stepping up and filling in that gap. And MSNBC had a big day, and voila, they're now making the rounds, right? They're making their rounds all over the place to claim their new king of the 8 p.m. slot. Now, I'll tell you, I don't claim to be the king of the 10 p.m. slot. I'll leave that for the people to decide. But I will say we are the only live program that's nationally syndicated this size in that time slot, 10 p.m. Eastern. And if you're on the West Coast, of course, that's 7 p.m. Pacific. And I take it so seriously because I feel like you people need relevant, real-time information, you people being our wonderful audience. So I try to give that to you. And we're going to bring you some of that tonight. We got some excellent analysis coming your way. On Friday, after saying they weren't going to do it, they went ahead and did it. The Dodgers decided that they were going to go ahead and honor the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence males, right? These are men that dress as women, they're drag queens, that portray themselves as nuns. It's a direct insult to the Catholic Church. Then they have pole dancers on a crucifix pretending to be Jesus. I mean, it doesn't get more offensive than this. And if you were tuned into Newsmax TV at any point this weekend, I was on Saturday and Sunday on the Wendy Bell Show discussing some of that, and as well as on Saturday Agenda with Kilmany Dukart. And there was lots to talk about. We talked about that. We're going to talk a little bit about Juneteenth, right? Because today is Juneteenth. And unlike some of the others that are off today, we are here. We're live. We're national. We're bringing you everything we've got. And we're going to continue our conversation. We're going to talk about espionage as well. Plus, we have somebody from the LGBTQ movement, someone that is a conservative, that's saying, you know what? It's one thing to be gay, and it's another thing to push an agenda that's actually harmful to the people you're supposed to represent. And we're seeing a whole lot of that happen. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to have that conversation first with Nick Giordano, then with Emma Jo Morris and Calder Walton about espionage. It's going to be an action-packed show. Don't miss any hour of this program. Make sure you get ready for the best 3 hours in talk radio, not because I'm doing it, but because you're a part of it. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So over the weekend, you heard about the controversy last week about the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball organization and how they were expecting to honor a group of men that dress as Catholic nuns. And they put up a crucifix and they have bearded men dancing provocatively, twerking, and pole dancing on the crucifix in an abhorrent, in my opinion, mockery of Christianity, a direct insult at Catholics and those that are in the habit. And this is who they decided to honor as their community hero. Now, after a backlash from their own supporters, LA Dodger fans, they decided not to honor this group. But then, about 4 hours before the game over the weekend, they said, you know what, we're going to do it anyway. And they brought the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence to the field, and they announced them. And one of them was on hand to do an interview with Red Liberty Media. This is about a minute long. I want you to hear this because it is breathtaking. Check this out.
Not mocking. I'm using satire.
You're absolutely mocking when you put Jesus on a cross and you pole dance on.
Like our bullies, you are putting words in my mouth, and I really don't.
Everybody's seen it. Everybody has seen it.
Yes, everyone has seen the satire that we do, and then they describe it in these terms that make them, oh, I'm being
I am
injured.
telling you, as a Christian, that is extremely, extremely offensive. When I see my God on the cross
It's
mocked.
offensive. You're using your God to make me look bad, to make me look foolish, to beat me up.
Why can't you just say, yeah, that was wrong? You could just say, yeah,
Because
that
it
was
is
wrong.
not wrong to heal people who were beaten and shot for being gay and trans. How dare you, madam? How dare you shame us?
He sounds like Greta Thunberg. How dare you? How dare you, madam? How dare you? Anyway, now this sister, I think the name is Sister Unity, was going at it. And there's more of that. We'll play more of those clips later on. But this was a big deal. And again, we talked about it last week, but it continued and it continued. And then thousands ascended. And I mentioned that on the air to protest this. And what I find remarkable is that in the wake of Target losing all this money, right? And again, not losing money per se, but, you know, losing market share, market value. It doesn't mean that they're, you know, taking a loss in their bank account. It means the total value of the company went down by that much as measured by the stock price. And the surprise is that the stock has stayed down there, even as the broader stock market has gone up relatively well, about 20% since January. So it's interesting to see how, you know, Target and other organizations that have, you know, gone woke and gone broke have taken this hit. And yet you would think the Dodgers would take a lesson from that. But it makes you think maybe this is the battle they want to fall on their sword over. I don't know. I wish I could get somebody from the Dodgers to come on and say, you know, we decided to do this because they put out a statement and that's it. You know, you get a tweet if you're lucky. But ultimately, I think there are Catholics out there, there are people out there, there are political observers out there that really took issue with this, and their voices were heard when they showed up en masse and blocked the entrance to Dodger Stadium. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the broader culture wars overall, as well as what's going on in the college campuses across the country. And that's why I want to bring in a friend of the program, a friend of mine, Professor Nick Giordano. Is a professor of political science at Suffolk Community College. He's also the host of the PAS Report podcast, and he is a higher education fellow for campus reform. Professor Nick Giordano, welcome.
Well, you didn't get a Dodger rep, but you got the next best thing. So how you doing, Rich?
What's up, brother? Welcome. So let's start with what we're talking about here, because I think it's an interesting topic where what we had been seeing in the college classroom, right, where many of your colleagues at different campuses had the academic freedom to continue to push and push and push an agenda with no one pushing back on them. But now that's spilled over into popular culture, into sporting events, and they've pushed a little too far. They've hit a raw nerve. Catholics, Christians have spoken up, and here we are. What say you?
Well, I think you're right, and I think that's why it's important to look at what goes on at college campuses, because ultimately what happens at college campuses bleeds into the rest of society, and all the bad ideas that come out are mostly from college campuses, as we're witnessing. You know, this idea, it's not necessarily the moron that does this act, that dress up like a nun and make a mockery of Catholicism. It's the Dodgers as an organization, and why are these organizations, whether it be the Dodgers, whether it's Target, whether it's Bud Light, why do they feel the need to bend over backwards for things that would have been absolutely ludicrous? You would never see companies behave this way 20 years ago. You wouldn't see companies behave this way 10 years ago. And yet now they feel that they have to bow down to the woke altar, and it's because if you look at who the staffing is, the kids that graduated college are now adults. They're now in these positions, and that's what's drawing in this insanity. But it has to come to a point where it's absurd. I mean, first of all, the Dodgers players themselves, I mean, let's Major League Baseball, you have an enormous Hispanic community in Major League Baseball. Many of the
especially
players,
in Los Angeles.
families. Correct. And so why would you insult your own players? Why would you insult your own consumers? And it's because they don't care. They feel that the public virtue signal is that they're doing this to placate a fringe minority of people, but those fringe minorities have the loudest voices right now.
Yeah, it really is a shame. It's A, a shame, and B, it just is nonsensical to me. I find it so difficult to believe that, look, we do radio here, right? And I say what I got to say. I'm not going to cater what I'm saying to any particular advertiser. But that being said, most people that are listening to this program enjoy it, and others listen because they like to fight with the radio, and that's fine. And the advertisers are aware of who the audience is. So they go ahead and they advertise on the program because they're reaching the audience they want to reach, right? So it makes sense. It's not about censorship in any way. It's really just about knowing your audience. And in my opinion, what is going on with the Dodgers that they decided, and you said, you brought up a great point with Hispanics. I didn't even think of that, but it's, I don't know. It's got to be in the 90s or in the high 80 percentile. Hispanics that are Christians, let alone Catholics. So you're right. You've got players, you've got the people that live in the area that are, season ticket holders and fans by and large. Even though LA's a liberal place, I think the proof is in the pudding. They showed up en masse to say no mas, right? They didn't like the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. So we'll hear a little bit more from that and continue our conversation with Professor Nick Giordano.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Why do you think this has become a passion project of some conservatives?
I continue hearing people making the argument that we're doing it because we want to prevent our students from having discomfort or guilt, because we don't want our students to be able to really wrestle with these really difficult things in times when they're maturing as individuals. and difficult historical points. But the thing I realized, and I wanted to speak out about it, is that's actually not true. It's a guise.
It's not about making kids uncomfortable.
It's not about making kids feel uncomfortable. It's about telling other kids that they shouldn't understand their own power. It's castrating them.
All right, so that's Governor Wes Moore. He's the governor of Maryland. And he says that this is castrating kids, book banning, right? Saying that we shouldn't have questionable material, the books that talk about fellatio between adults and children, which they call that LGBTQ in a lot of places, by the way. In other places, like the law, they call it rape. But anyway, statutory rape. This is the conversation that Wes Moore is having with Jen Circleback Psaki, former White House press secretary turned MSNBC host. And they're having this conversation where she's saying, this isn't about making kids uncomfortable, is it? And he says, no, this is about castrating the ones that feel different. I mean, the whole thing is a farce. And if it wasn't so serious, it'd be laughable. Anyway, this is what's going on in the education sector, right? We've got more and more of an encroachment on the classroom with social agendas. It's not about teaching your kids about life and about becoming productive members of society that can maintain employment or start a business. No, now it's about teaching them what you should be teaching them at home, and probably would if you had the chance, but they're just going so far out into left field with all these new ideas, including sexual experimentation and whatnot. It really is remarkable what's happening in this day and age. So our guest, Professor Nick Giordano from Suffolk Community College in New York, is with us, and he's got a brand new column just out about a week and a half ago on campusreform.org, how the Biden administration is politically weaponizing higher education. Professor Nick Giordano, tell us about it.
Well, what people don't understand is that Dwight D. Eisenhower, one of the great presidents of the United States, actually warned us about the nation's scholars, and that the amount of federal dollars that's going to trickle into the university system through grant funding is going to severely manipulate this country. It's going to manipulate how these institutions operate and the influence that these institutions have, and it creates an unholy alliance. It's funny because in Eisenhower's farewell address, everyone remembers his line about the military-industrial complex. Never once did he talk about the academic or educational industrial complex. People forget that he warned about it, that complex as well. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the Biden administration has sought to weaponize this. So the article centers around Media Research Center story where they found that Homeland Security grant funding is going to universities. One of them in particular was the University of Dayton. And in the grant application itself, they used materials that linked Fox News, the Heritage Foundation, the Christian Broadcasting Network as the seeds of extremism. And then one level below white supremacist organizations was PragerU and Turning Point USA and the Blue Lives Matter movement. They're one step below white supremacy. So it really goes to show you an agenda is being pushed, because a few months ago I published another op-ed. That one was in Fox News through Campus Reform. And what it showed was, again, grant funding being used for colleges and universities to build out a censorship database, to build out a system that is designed to track and suppress information that the government may deem disinformation or misinformation. So it's dangerous territory that not many people are paying attention to, this alliance that's been created between the university campuses and the federal government.
Professor Nick Giordano, I mean, this is a pretty serious problem. I know that you're not new to this, right? You've been in the classroom for 2 decades teaching. You've worked with the government in the emergency management capacity and Homeland Security, and now we're seeing this actually take root, right? Does this shock you like it's shocking me?
It does, and that's why, when I was in the emergency management Homeland Security arena, we got grant funding all the time. We got emergency preparedness grants I worked on. I worked on urban area security initiative grants, And never once did we target ideological Democrat or Republican ideological points of view and saying that that was the seeds of extremism. So the times have certainly changed since I left the emergency management and homeland security field. It seems like almost every tool that was created after 9/11 has now been turned into a weapon against political opposition. And I think that's the most frightening aspect. We're seeing the complete weaponization of higher education. We're seeing the weaponization of our schools with the brainwashing that is, it's no longer indoctrination. It's now brainwashing. When you're pushing these books on little children, I mean, let's be honest here. Schools always censored the books that were in elementary schools and middle schools because it's age-appropriate material for the student body. And there was a separation. There was things that parents are supposed to speak to their children about that the schools wouldn't get involved in. And yet we're seeing this push to try and cut the parents out. You just had the Southern Poverty Law Center label the Moms for Liberty group an extremist organization. Now, I hope they sue like Ayaan Hirsi Ali did, and where she won and defeated them. But it really is astonishing that normal conservative viewpoints are now being labeled as far-right extremism. Even moderate viewpoints are being labeled as far-right extremism. And it goes to the first segment when we were talking about that's why you have these nuns going to Dodger Stadium and the Dodger Corporation inviting them to come to the stadium. That's why Target is doing what it's doing. That's why Bud Light did the Dylan Mulvaney thing. You have these loons that are controlling everything, and unfortunately, they're using it to bludgeon their political opposition.
Unbelievable. Now, we see that you have the Southern Poverty Law Center saying that these are extremist groups, and we know that the Department of Justice labeled parents with a EDU threat tag, saying that parents at school board meetings, we needed to be aware of what was going on, and they were tracked and whatnot. But do you see this ending, turning around, improving, or is that it? It's if you speak up now, you're public enemy number one.
Well, I think the more people that speak out, the better it is, because it's easy to silence when just a handful of people are speaking out, and it's easy to play whack-a-mole. But when most people are speaking out, and I'm talking about getting Democrats to speak out as well, because this could easily be turned around on them, and it could be used to target them as well. So when more people are speaking out, it becomes much more difficult. Now, the main avenue, the main vehicle to fix many of these, to right some of these wrongs, is through Congress. And it's to start to defang these bureaucratic agencies that have grown so powerful that they simply do what they want. Nobody's ever held accountable, whether it's the FBI and the FBI leadership, whether it's the NIH, whether it's Lord Fauci, whoever it may be. Nobody's ever held accountable. If you start holding these people accountable, then you'll start to correct the system. You'll start to bring the system back to its original intent, which is limited government. Congress could easily begin to remove the power from these bureaucratic agencies because they do have the power of oversight and they have the power of the purse. Yet they've shown no real will to actually do that just yet. Why? I can't answer that question because, again, are they afraid of these bureaucratic agencies? But I can't answer that question. One of the most shocking things was in 2015 when the CIA was literally monitoring sitting members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. When that came out, the Senate was outraged, yet they didn't do one thing to try and reform the CIA, to punish anyone within the CIA. I mean, someone should have been arrested for that and gone to jail for that. You can't spy on sitting members of the United States Senate. They tried to take down a sitting president, as we all saw with the whole Russian collusion thing. So when you have these agencies that are this powerful and nobody's doing anything about it, it is really concerning. When you have Senator Chuck Schumer warning that the intel community and the law enforcement community has 6 ways of Sunday to get back at you, that's really concerning. Because who's supposed to be in charge of the system? Well, it's supposed to be the people through their elected representatives, but it seems that the nameless, faceless bureaucrats are the ones that are driving everything.
Scary stuff. Professor Nick Giordano, I want you to stick with us. I want to talk about Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, right? So this is now spilling over into our foreign policy where it seems like it's a game of appeasement. He goes over to Asia, comes back saying, you know what, she's not such a bad guy. We like China. If a strong China is very good for America. And we're not necessarily committed to Taiwan. Crazy stuff. Nick Giordano, stick with us, folks. We're coming right back. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
On Taiwan, I reiterated the long-standing U.S. One China policy. That policy has not changed. It's guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 joint communiques, the 6 assurances. We do not support Taiwan independence. We remain opposed to any unilateral changes to the status quo by either side. We continue to expect the peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences. We remain committed to meeting our responsibilities under the Taiwan Relations Act, including making sure that Taiwan has the ability to defend itself.
All right, welcome back. That's Secretary Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, discussing his trip to Asia, his conversations with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And while we've suspected all the while that Biden and this administration will turn their backs on Taiwan and any assurances that may have been promised in the past, they remain committed to the One China policy. I mean, next we'll hear that, they're signing on to domestic Chinese policy, saying they endorse that. Nick Giordano, what say you?
I say it's amateur hour over at the State Department and in this White House. I mean, the reality is when we did the One China policy back in 1979, it was to recognize that the People's Republic of China was the legitimate government of China. However, it wasn't about formally recognizing them having sovereignty or controlling the sovereignty of Taiwan. In fact, in 1980, we did the Taiwanese Defense Act where we backed them. Now, our China policy when it comes to Taiwan has always been ambiguous, and that's the point. You want to keep the Chinese leadership off guard about exactly what we're going to do. Yet, when it comes to this administration, I mean, does Tony Blinken want to really telegraph, hey, go into Taiwan, take it over, control 90% of the semiconductors out there, increase your power in the Pacific? This really isn't a good time for Tony Blinken to make that type of statement. And I have a feeling that by tomorrow, that statement is going to be walked back to a certain degree, as diplomatically as it can be. But it really reminded me back in December of 2021 when President Biden said, well, small invasion into the Ukraine by Russia isn't really that big of a deal. And obviously, that was a bit paraphrased, but that's pretty much what he said. I think this is like the same situation, right? Saying, that, hey, we're not going to sit there and talk about Taiwanese independence. We recognize China as the legitimate government. I think it is a real problem for this administration. I don't think that they're prepared to be dealing with people like Xi Jinping. I mean, let's face it, the Chinese leadership has been making gains for the last 35, 40 years. They've made huge strides, and they've increased their power over the course of the last 3 years under this administration dramatically. I mean, they are the competitor to the United States, the main competitor to the United States. Now, we still have leverage over China. I mean, we buy 18% of their exports. The United States is the most materialistic culture that exists. China's second. And we buy a lot of stuff from China. So we do have a lot of economic leverage over China because they have 1.3 billion mouths to feed. They can't make up for the loss of the United States. At the same time, we have to rely on China because we need cheap goods. Now, you would think that alarm bells went off during COVID. Hey, everything's being made over in China, including prescription drugs. Maybe we should start to find other countries to make it. All the Congress people were complaining about that, and yet they didn't do a damn thing to try and figure this out, to start to decrease our dependency, to turn to China and say, hey, if you try and challenge us, well, you will lose us as one of your biggest consumers. Instead, we continually bow to them. Now, the theory was always that if we open up to China, China's eventually going to become more like the United States. They're going to become more free. You're going to see liberty. Well, the exact opposites have happened, right? Since our relationship with China continues, it seems like our governments are becoming more like them, are they not? Where they become more authoritarian, more dictatorial. So we got a real problem, and unfortunately, we don't have the right leadership to really challenge the Chinese regime right now.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. Folks, we're on with Professor Nick Giordano, professor of political science at Suffolk Community College. He's also the higher education fellow at Campus Reform, And Professor Nick Giordano, excellent conversation. I want you to let everybody know how they can follow you, how they could listen to your podcast. Tell them about the podcast, where they could get it, and how they could keep up to speed with the work you're doing.
Well, everyone go to pasreport.com. That's where you'll find the podcast. They can go to campusreform.org, and it's important that we check out Campus Reform because, let's face it, they're the ones keeping us apprised of what's going on the college campuses. And I do have a new piece coming out this week, should be going out in Fox News, talking about everything that we're witnessing today is because of the death of civics and history in the classroom, in the K through 12 system. And then once we get to the college system, it gets 10 times worse with speech codes and bias reporting systems. And that's why 29% of young people, Generation Z, says it's okay for governments to put cameras in your homes to monitor you, which is probably one of the most frightening statistics I ever saw.
Man, that explains all the incels out there. Folks, Professor Nick Giordano is amazing. Make sure you follow him at PAS Report on Twitter and the rest of the social media. Professor Nick Giordano, thanks for being here. Godspeed.
Thank you for having me, Rich.
You bet. All right, folks, we're continuing with your calls and more on these topics and more straight ahead, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Our telephone number, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833, the number 4, my last name, VALDES, or you could chime in online at Rich Valdez with an S on all of the social media. And let's check in with Lance calling us from Galloway, New Jersey, WOND. Go right ahead, Lance.
Hey, good evening, Rich. Really sad, well, disappointed I wasn't able to pop a question off to your last guest. I wanted to know
I'm sorry about that.
Not one of Biden's sort of like point men and women seem to are held accountable or responsible or even considered to be let loose. It's like they have tenure and they can't get out. And that's one of the big problems with the entire educational field, because if you don't cut it, they find a way to keep you there, whether or not you are, put it this way, efficacious or inept. So, I mean, if you look at all the characters that Biden has in his foreign policy department, Austin Milley, Austin, Victoria Nuland, Blinken, and you got Kirby. These people are, without a doubt, if you had to give them an example, like when you had to ask Ken J. Jackson, what is a woman? If you had to ask them, these people, what is a sentence? Well, a sentence is a group of words that express a complete thought and it stands on its own. And unfortunately, all the 5 of those people should remember one of my best classroom disciplinary lines. A closed mouth gathers no feet.
That's true. And you know what, Lance? It's what Professor Giordano said. It's amateur hour in the Biden administration. Thank you, Lance, for the call. We're coming straight back with the rest of the program. Hour number 2 is coming right up. Don't move a muscle.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo, and I'm happy to be here with you this Monday evening. If you want to join our late-night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-4-VALDES. Now, there's a few different things going on. Of course, all eyes on Trump, with John Durham set to testify on the Russiagate investigation this week. You've got Hunter Biden, who set up an account with a corrupt foreign bank and shut it down for breaking money laundering rules. So that's why it got shut down. Well, we'll get into that a little bit later. Plus, Judge Cannon has ordered Trump and his lawyers not to share any evidence ahead of the classified documents trial. As things continue to shape up with that, we'll bring you all of the latest on that. And we're continuing our conversation on the story that broke, I think it was on Friday, of the Dodgers. And over the weekend, that continued with its ripple effect. People are still very upset with this. And overall, I think there's a response to Pride Month. And an interesting response is from a particular individual I was just reading about. And here's a quote from something they wrote. It said, "I used to hate Pride, probably for all the same reasons any conservative scoffs at it. It's a loud, obnoxious, overhyped, corporatized, sexualized, awkward holiday. But to me, it was personal. Growing up conservative and proud to be American," she writes, "I rolled my eyes at the parades and flags, and then it occurred to me that as I got a little bit older, she realized she was gay herself. Yes, total dread, total horror. She has to be associated with that. She couldn't bear it." I mean, just riveting article, and I figured rather than me share tidbits of it, I want the author of the article to join us in our conversation. Now, she's been on the program before. She's actually the editor at the New York Post that put out that Hunter Biden laptop story that was censored by Twitter and would have been a game changer back in October of 2016. Her name is Emma Jo Morris. She's now the politics editor at Breitbart.com. Emma Jo Morris, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be back.
You bet. Thank you. And I was reading your piece, and I think it's a fascinating piece. Tell us about your personal experience being of the LGBTQ community, but still feeling like this Pride Month celebration is overdone in so many ways, and the harm you feel it's causing.
Well, yeah. So, that was what the piece was really, it's a personal essay of sorts that I published as a column on Breitbart. And, I came up, conservative, obviously. I've been conservative from birth. and I always found Pride Month just absurd and ridiculous. What's the celebration about? Nobody earned anything. Why are we talking about this? Why are we calling attention to this? A lot of that. And then, obviously it occurred to me that I was gay, and I was just mortified. Obviously I was mortified about that, but I was also really mortified with the cultural connotation now that this part of me had. Obviously I'm not one of those people at all that thinks that my identity as a homosexual has anything whatsoever to do with my character or my personality. I hope that that's the least interesting thing about me.
Right.
But it's still part of who I am, and when you come out, like, people know that, oh, she's gay, and I was terrified of that, indicating something about me because of the culture. And people assuming things about me because of that culture. And I eventually got married, obviously years after I realized that I was gay and came out and all that. And my wife is very conservative, conservative. She's not political, but, she's very traditional. She was raised with God. She's very patriotic, and she's so normal, you know what I mean? She's just super cool, just like not crazy in any direction politically. And she wished me happy Pride when we first got together, and I kind of thought that was funny. I'm like, you're not the type of person to be into this. Like, what are you talking about? And she said, like, you know, it's not that I'm into this. Like, she was like, Pride is a celebration and an honoring of the civil rights achievements of, you know, Americans. And you know, I kind of like thought that was kind of funny. And we had this conversation back and forth. And then I ended up looking into it myself because I wasn't totally familiar with the gay cause. Obviously, it never was something that appealed to me personally, really, other than my own proclivity, but not politically, that's for sure. And and I started to look into it, and it's true. It's like in my mother's lifetime, since the 50s, you know, in the 50s, gays were it was a crime. It was a crime. And they were evicted from their homes, and they were kicked out of, fired from their jobs and kicked out of social clubs and ejected from polite society just for this, you know, what to me is an immutable characteristic. I would never choose this. And I spent years, you know, trying to run away from it. And to me, this is not something that's in your control. So I, you know, found that really interesting. And, you know, you look into it in this history, there's this like really intense history of like, you know, a civil rights crusade. And it's not only gays that were in that crusade, you know, it's the American people that grant that equality. And they did do that in remarkable time. So, you know, that's what Pride is really about. And it's just been totally bastardized by this political interest group, the big LGBTQ political interest group that just needs new frontiers to raise money off of. So they kind of scandalize homosexuality and that, you know, obviously takes shape in Pride. But no, like this is a holiday that actually celebrates the American people and their remarkable tolerance, acceptance, and love for their fellow American.
And what I'm gathering here is in your own journey as part of the LGBT community, although you don't participate, you've realized that what's happening now, what you see in this overdone, overhyped, over-politicized month-long celebration, is that it's kind of being done in vain. It's being done. It's causing more harm than good.
Exactly. It's on the one hand, it calls like crazy attention to this thing that doesn't mean anything about the person's character, i.e. their sexual preferences, and who they decide to marry and whatever. I mean, you know, it calls all this attention to something that we literally, the whole civil rights crusade was to say we want to be just normal people, you know, just treat us normally. And now all of a sudden we've gone to a place where, no, we actually need special privileges. We need you to raise a special flag at the White House. You know what I mean? Like so that's one thing. Then it also marginalizes people like me who are terrified of coming out because they don't want to be drafted for some esoteric political battle that doesn't mean anything to them. You know, so that's one thing. And then on the other hand, you know, as a result of all of this, you have this backlash that I'm seeing everywhere where, you know, they've decided that there's a community called LGBTQIAS+ to whatever.
It's a very long
letters in the acronym of of people that have nothing to do with each other. I have nothing to do with the trans experience. I mean, I don't have any animosity toward them. I just have nothing to do with them. I don't connect with that experience at all. I don't get it at all. That has nothing to do with homosexuality. And I actually
I want to pause right there because that's what I want to delve into is really it seems like a lot of groups have hijacked this movement and I think it's all for political purposes, and I'd like your feedback on that. Folks, we're on with Emma Jo Morris, politics editor at Breitbart News. She was the political editor for the New York Post when the Hunter Biden story came out, and that was a story that she was the editor on. And she's going to continue with us discussing her latest piece titled "Pride has been destroyed by the LGBTQ machine, but the achievement of equal civil rights is worth honoring." Emma Jo Morris continues with us straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
dare you shame us in our own Pride Festival, madam?
We're in public, one. We're on a public street.
In Pride, yes, in the middle of West Hollywood, in the Pride Festival, when we should all be celebrating. We can have differences, and you can tell I'm angry. We should be able to talk about our...
Why are you angry about me saying, look, I'm a Christian? When you put someone mimicking Jesus on a cross and pole dance him, that's offensive to me. That is deeply offensive. Why is that wrong to you for me to say that?
We're not making a mockery of them. Satire is not making a mockery of someone to offend those people. That's offensive.
But I'm telling you, as a Christian, that's how it is interpreted, because that's what it is. You can sit here all day and say, that's not what we're doing, that's not what we're doing, but that is what you're doing.
That's Natalie Carey interviewing Sister Unity from the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence this past few days ago at Dodger Stadium, and that's on Red Liberty Media. Now, I played that because I feel that there has been an encroachment on the gay and lesbian movement community, or the Pride celebration, if you will, that has really taken a twist, right, for both not only the trans movement, I'm going to say, but really what the trans movement lately represents, in my opinion, is the constant barrage on exploring this with children, right? Children, what they call gender affirming care, and trying to lump everybody into one fell swoop, if you will, making it like one voting block of people. And as I speak about this more and more, I meet more and more people from this community. We've had other people that Brandon Struck was on recently, a gay man, saying, absolutely not. This stuff is crazy. Nobody's here trying to recruit kids. Yet there is part of the movement that seems to be doing that. And this is why I think people are up in arms, like Emma Jo Morris, that are saying, enough is enough. This isn't what I stand for. Emma Jo Morris, welcome back. I'd like your feedback on not why, but more so how. Like, how did this movement that's so heavily focused on youth and children gain control over the LGBTQ agenda?
Yeah, well, it's obviously a political move. This is a movement that at one point had a very noble cause, in my opinion, which is just achieving, civil rights and equality for all American citizens, whether they are straight or gay or blue or green, that every American citizen ought to have the same rights, be treated the same, acknowledged the same. Of course, right. Yes, of course. I'm talking about a homosexual here. This is not, I'm not talking about kids or anything like that. I'm talking about
because that's the argument
people.
they make, right? That kids should have the same right and they should be able to get married. And it's crazy
that's
stuff that I've
So
heard.
what I was going to say is around 2015, around the gay marriage ruling, by the Supreme Court, and around then too, you were having broad social acceptance of gays in society. And the reason for existence of the LGBT, let's say, or gay lobby kind of ended. And then I think from there, it's not like they just pack up and go home. This is a huge fundraising apparatus. This is a huge political apparatus. So they had to move on to kind of like a new frontier. And that's what I think the expanding acronym is. It's an ever broadening mission for a fundraising apparatus and for a political apparatus. And that's, I think, where we are. But, the thing about the LGBTQ, whatever, I think really it's important for listeners and the American people to understand, first of all, there is nothing whatsoever in common between each of those letters in the acronym. Gays and lesbians, okay, even though, they are quite different, but okay, let's make a community of them. You want to throw in bisexuals. I don't really understand why that needs a special interest, but fine. Okay, I can deal with that. But then after that, after the LGB, you've lost me. You've totally lost me. Again, not because I have any animus toward any American citizen. I don't. I
right,
don't.
You're just saying you don't see the affinity.
Breitbart. I just don't see the connection. In fact, I think that the trans ideology actually undermines the homosexual experience completely, because the trans ideology says that gender is fluid and that you can kind of choose your gender no matter what your sex is. And the homosexual experience is that, no, you're only attracted to people of the same sex, and that sex is immutable. And, conversion therapy tried to explore, maybe just, closing your eyes and not bothering with sex and how important it is. No, that does not work. That is exactly the antithesis of what it means to be a homosexual. So the trans and the gays have nothing whatsoever in common. But what's going on is they've been grouped together, and now the trans ideology or political machine has decided that they have to make every single person in America basically bend the knee to an ideology that doesn't resonate with reality. And this is all under the name of the LGBTQ quote unquote community, which again, nothing in common, let alone like representing gays. This is absurd. So, I think that this debate really needs to be reframed. This is not an LGBT versus straight conversation. This is a sane versus insane conversation. If you talk to, and listen, since I published this piece on Breitbart that you read at the top of the last segment, I have been contacted by everybody under the sun who is gay, straight, whatever, but a lot of gay people. Do they hate you
or do they love you?
No. So a lot of gay liberals reached out to me and said, this says exactly what I felt and couldn't say myself. And you have to understand, this is not a gay issue. This twerking on kids in public libraries and stuff, that's not a gay thing. That is an insanity thing.
Yeah, no, and you're right. And I totally get where you're coming from with that, because I think we saw the same scenario, if you will, with Rose Montoya, a trans activist that went topless with a few others at the White House.
Yes.
And the White House said, you can't do that. You're banned. And then they said, oh, I'm sorry. I was just trying to live my joy. And then again, gays, right? I'm calling them gays because for lack of any better word, but other members of the LGBTQ community said, oh, hell no. You're setting us back here. You're turning back the clock on all the advancement that we tried to make. And
that's what's terrible is
and she had to apologize again.
Yeah, in the 70s and the 80s, even in the 60s, when the civil rights movement was kind of picking up for gays, the conversation was around the family and the attack on the family and the attack on children. And, thank God, the point prevailed that nobody is trying to come for your children. Listen, when you're gay, you don't need a recruitment center at school. You know it. And nobody is under the impression that we should be going and picking children up and involving them in any of this. This is a conversation for somebody between them and God, and that's the truth. This is a struggle that is highly personal, and there's absolutely no reason that one would need to be recruited to this club. And there's absolutely no reason why this needs to be a topic of public conversation anymore. You know what I mean? We're done. We're good. And what you're seeing with all of this stupid activism is an attempt to gin up controversy for the sake of fundraising. And that is all. And that has nothing to do with people who are typically normal taxpayers.
Right. Emma Jo Morris is politics editor at Breitbart. Thank you for sharing your truth and for clarifying and shedding light on this. Definitely something I had not looked at this way. Excellent piece. You guys should check it out. Get her perspective on it. Thank you, Emma Jo Morris, for being with us.
Thank you so much.
You bet. All right, folks, more to come straight ahead. We're going to talk about spying and the battle between the East and the West. Don't go anywhere.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So to spy or not to spy, that is the question. Now, interestingly, President Biden, or who I like to call Joe El Baboso Biden, was at Andrews Air Force Base, and they made this change a while back. They call them now Joint Base, when they close the bases. I think it's the silliest thing, but he was at Joint Base Andrews, which is really Andrews Air Force Base, on Saturday. And he says that the China spy balloon, which they say was a weather balloon, wasn't really intentional. Listen to this.
On China, Mr. President, can Secretary Blinken ease tensions with China on this trip, do you think?
Sure. Well, look, China has some legitimate difficulties unrelated to the United States. And I think one of the things that balloon caused was not so much that it got shot down, but I don't think the leadership knew where it was and knew what was in it and knew what was going on. I think it was more embarrassing than it was intentional.
Of course, that's President Joe Biden saying, well, because, I got hairy legs and because you can't go into a Dunkin' Donuts if you don't have a slight Indian accent. One of those crazy things he says. And he basically is saying that, look, President Xi Jinping never really meant to fly a spy balloon over sensitive American military sites, some that had nuclear capabilities. So, that wasn't intentional. And again, the quote you heard, I don't think the leadership knew where it was and knew what it was and knew what was going on, is what he said as he was headed for Philadelphia to campaign for his 2024 reelection. And, of course, ending with, I think it was more embarrassing than intentional. Now, Biden's been saying that since the beginning. Like, I don't know if you remember, but I know I do. During the 2016 campaign, he did a CNN town hall. And on that CNN town hall, Biden was asked a question. I wish we had that clip. That was such an interesting, very telling clip where he's asked by the moderator. They say, well, China has had this, forced labor policy and against Uyghur Muslims. And there's rumors that they're exterminated. And Biden's answer, with his hands in his pocket, kind of like shrugging his shoulders is, well, everybody has cultural differences. And, basically, look, in China, that's how they do, right? In China, they kill people. What's your problem, right? What's up with you? And listen, I get to each his own. I really do. But when it comes to killing people, these are legitimate human rights abuses. Nobody is allowed to kill other people because you have different laws than we do. That just isn't a thing. That's one of those things that is universal, and you should be allowed to live your life without being killed by your government. And the fact that he just, shrugged it off the way he did, very dismissively, told me that, he's not willing to take on China. And I knew it then, and we've seen it every day since. And, when he says things like he's hoping over the next couple of months that he'll be meeting with Xi again, talking about their legitimate differences, yada, yada, yada. Of course, this is not a legitimate difference. This is, and if you want to call it a legitimate difference, then call it, you sent a spy balloon to my country and you're going to have to pay the price. Like I've always said, and forgive me for being crass, but if somebody's punching you in the face, your immediate reaction should not be, why are you punching me in the face? It doesn't really matter why they're punching you in the face. The bottom line is that they are. So your immediate reaction has to be to get them off of you and punch them back, right? So clearly that's what Biden needs to do. If you're walking down the street, somebody just starts pounding your jaw. No, sir, you're not allowed to hit me in the face. I'm going to hit you back, right? We're going to stop you from hitting me, and I'm going to hit you back. You're not allowed to say, what the heck are you doing? What's going on? You're allowed to do it, but it would be the silliest thing ever. Where's the logic in that? Who cares? They're hitting you in the face. You can find out later if it really matters to you that much. It doesn't really matter to me. I don't care if, oh my gosh, I thought you were somebody else. You look like the guy that's messing around with my wife. Who cares? You've hit me in the face, sir. I'm hitting you back. And I think this is where we go wrong, where Biden doesn't react to anything in kind. Instead, he shrugs it off. He's dismissive, and we just move on. And then he has his lackey, who's no better, right? Of course, I'm talking about Anthony Blinken, who, we heard earlier him saying that we don't support Taiwan, but he went on to say in Beijing today that where there is growth and progress in China, it's in our interest. To me, I get the connotation here that if they succeed in China, we succeed in the U.S. Now, there may be some out there that believe that, thinking that, we have this 20% interest or 18% interest in trade. granted, I get that. And there's a lot of plastic items that come out of China, a lot of apparel items that come out of China. But ultimately, I think we win in the long run if we sever ties with China. I don't know. Maybe I'm an extremist. You want to argue with me, feel free. But listen to Anthony Blinken at the news conference today in Beijing, China.
The economic relationship with China is vitally important, and also, when it's fair, a very positive thing for countries around the world. And at a time when countries are trying to rebound from COVID, something the United States has done very successfully, we want to see growth. We want to see success in every part of the world, including, of course, in the major economies like China. It's in our interest. But at the same time, as I said, it's not in our interest to provide technology to China that could be used against us.
Yeah. So, again, talking out of both sides of his mouth. And again, I understand that's kind of what politicians, especially diplomats, are supposed to do. But, you know, when you're suggesting that we are closing the chapter on the spy balloon so that we can, you know, wish the best for China, because that good old one China policy, and forget Taiwan, and it's all about China and making peace and making nice. And I'm looking at all these pictures all day long of the body language between Blinken and Xi Jinping, and he just looks so submissive around him and toward him. And things like that embarrass me. I got to be honest. You know, I loved the way Trump handled himself. You know, chest out, firm stance. You know, he portrayed a solid America, an America that meant business. And I feel like Biden just sends such a message of weakness. And then you combine that with news every day where people are saying, oh, he's taken this and he bribed us for that and he's involved in this and we gave his son the money for that and then his daughter and then this one and the other one. I mean, it's just so disappointing and demoralizing, and I get it. Nobody wants to feel that badly about their own country and about their commander-in-chief. But then you look at a guy like Blinken and you think, oh, my gosh, Biden's the epitome of strength next to a guy like Blinken. It's just, in Spanish, there's a saying, you go from Guatemala to Guatapeor, right? From Guata bad to Guata worse. It sounds funnier in Spanish. Anyway, that's my take on Blinken. I think that he's the wrong guy for the job. He's capitulating to China, and they can be as capricious as they want to be because they know that he'll take it. And Biden takes it just the same. And that's got to stop. Anyway, your calls and more are coming up. 833-4-VALDEZ. 833, the number 4, Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez, and our phone lines are open. We're going to your calls momentarily, and I see there's a few calls online already. I'm going to get to you in a second. I just wanted to share some 2024 news. I just saw a report that says that you have Jordan Peterson, Professor Jordan Peterson, had done a report with. He did an interview with RFK Jr. And in this interview that he did with Jordan Peterson, it aired on YouTube. And YouTube has already taken the interview down because they say that it violated their vaccine policy. Fascinating, right? Isn't that fascinating? Anyway, I just think that that's just crazy town. Anyway, let's go to Joel. He's in Johnson City, Tennessee, WJCW. Joel, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Well, good morning, and thank you. I don't want to seem snarky or insulting, but I want to phrase something. It's a question. I don't believe it's ignorance, and I hope it's not propagandistic, but you and other talk radio, especially on the right, phrases, they couch the left and Biden as being stupid, being ignorant, being incompetent. I don't believe that's the case. I mean, we're not talking about a Chamberlain who had a policy of appeasement. We're talking about people who are doing exactly what they want. And I can give you any issue that you want to throw at me. And they've accomplished.
No, I'm not really interested in debating
you.
You called in and you made your statement that you're saying others, maybe not me. I haven't. I'm criticizing Biden and Blinken for doing things that I'm categorizing as missteps, but I'm not saying that they're blundering idiots and they're doing so accidentally. I realize it's nefarious. This is exactly what they want to do. It's strategic, and this is what they do because Biden is a pacifist who is, in my opinion, sold out to China. So he's happy to go along with their agenda. And Blinken is his lapdog that does as he's told.
Well, it's the way you couched it. I agree exactly with what you said, that he looks weak in his posture and this and that. And that connotes, it implies to a certain degree that he's not able to do what he's intending to do, but I believe he's doing exactly, as you just said, what he's intending to do.
Yeah, no, good point. You're right. And I do think that he portrays weakness. And I think that's probably just a natural part of his pacifistic nature and the way he is, because, you know, why not look like a pansy if you've got your hand out and your bag man, a.k.a. Hunter Biden, out there collecting every last dollar that he can collect on the way. So good point. Thank you, Joel, in Johnson City, Tennessee, WJCW. I appreciate it. I would get to the rest of your calls, but I can't see any names. So we'll get to those momentarily as we get that figured out. But yes, Biden portrays weakness. And it's the weakness that I think causes the rest of our enemies to continue to prey on us, right? And it causes China. See, part of China's total MO is that they want to look strong. They want to look like the world leader. And they're not able to look like the world leader if you have a strong U.S. person representing the United States, and whomever that may be, right? And in this instance, it behooves them to fly their spy balloon and do this and do that, because once you do that, then of course you're able to then go to your people and say, well, look at these idiots. Look at how look at how the Americans are handling this. This is why we go there. We send our balloons. We flex on them, and they do absolutely nothing, right? And I think that's part of why China does what they do, is because they want those headlines. They want to control the narrative in whatever media they can control, i.e. in China and anywhere else around the globe. It's going to be very difficult to say the United States takes strong position against China. On what and how? They haven't. And that's my point. Coming right back. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And get your calls in now, 833-4-VALDEZ. Open Phone America is coming right up in just a couple of minutes, and we're going to be getting to all of those calls momentarily. 833-4-VALDEZ. This is your chance to weigh in. Any topic, any issue, I'm happy to discuss it. I love connecting with the American people live and late night. But what I wanted to just make a quick mention of was, yes, I am completely aware that there were mergers and base closures between Air Force bases and Army bases some years ago. And they no longer call them Air Force bases. They call them Joint Base whatever, right? Like in the example I made earlier, Joint Base Andrews. However, I do not like the term. I'm old school. I still believe that, men are men, boys are boys, girls are girls, women are women. I believe in that stuff. And I also believe that it's Andrews Air Force Base. And I will continue to call it such as long as I have breath in my lungs. And I will do so inaccurately, but not ignorantly, because that's what I feel like doing. And I refuse to cow to anyone that tells me how I need to say things. I'm just saying, sometimes I'm a little bit of a rebel. I just won't do it. I identify as Andrews Air Force Base. How about that? Okay, so now I'm in the clear. Now, I wanted to put that out there because I know that we got a call on that. Somebody was saying, let them know. I know, ma'am. Thank you very much. And I appreciate that. I just don't like the term. Now, I wanted to focus our attention onto a couple of different things. A few different things that we're going to get to in the upcoming hour. Of course, YouTube pulling down the interview with RFK Jr. and Jordan Peterson, saying that there was disinformation, misinformation, and how it violated their vaccine policy. Again, YouTube's free to do what they want, but at some point, everybody just needs to step back and say, all right, hold on a second. So we've got this guy that's running for president. Don't you think people want to know what he has to say? So they could go, wow, that guy's a whack job. I don't want him. Or, wow, that guy's terrific. And that's their fear, that you're not smart enough to make up your own mind. That, oh my gosh, if we put Trump on there, if we put RFK on there, and we don't censor these people, you might actually get crazy and think that they're making sense. Heavens forbid we have some free thinkers. This is why I'll never, ever, ever be a collectivist. This is why I'll never side with the crazy lefties, because ultimately they believe in their hubris, in their arrogance, that they know better than you. And this is why I don't work in the government. I worked in the government. I worked with some relatively good people. Some people really good, others not so good. But some of the people I worked with believed in creating leaderless environments that were run by the communities. And part of the work that I did when I was in state government was to help neighborhood centers, we call them family success centers, to launch and to put as many of them as we could. And it was fascinating. During a time where we were cutting the budget, Governor Christie at the time was cutting the state budget left and right, especially in social services, everywhere across the board, there were cuts. People were up in arms. Oh, you're taking away our funding for this, that, and the other thing. But yet these centers required so little money. I think it was something like $200,000 per year, 40,000 of which went to like a director for the center. So it had such a small budget that they didn't get cut. In fact, they expanded. And I loved the fact that one of the requirements were to have not just community leaders, quote unquote, on the board that made up the boards of these centers, but more so parents, people that had children going to school in that community. And they were the ones that were setting the agenda, saying they wanted parenting education or they wanted domestic violence help or whatever it was. Because these things weren't just in poor neighborhoods, they were in rich neighborhoods too, like Bergen County, New Jersey. So that the idea was that you were offering some sort of support and connectivity amongst the people in a neighborhood to rebuild that old neighborhood feel. And I think when you have people that think that way, they don't want you in government. And that's why I'm not there. Anyway, we're coming right back. Open Phone America right now.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And welcome to the program. 833-4-VALDEZ is our phone number if you want to join in. We are live. We are national. It's the Monday night edition, and we are taking your calls on any topic you'd like. One of the topics that I want to bring up this hour in Open Phone America, which, by the way, is a time-honored tradition here on this program. This program dates back more than 45 years to Long John Neville, who used to be the 10 o'clock host for... Back then, it was called Mutual Broadcasting Systems before it was renamed to Westwood One. And Westwood One owns, several hundred radio stations through Cumulus Media. And we have another bunch of affiliates that air the program. And after that, it was Larry King, right? The amazing late, great Larry King, who did Open Phone America in this time slot. And what an amazing feature of that show it was. And it was continued for 30 years by the late, great Jim Bohannon. God rest his soul. And I count it as an honor and a privilege to speak with Americans from every corner of the country, right? Because we have an affiliate in Alaska, New York City. I mean, you can literally hear this program, maybe not in every single state, but in most of the states, and definitely straight across America and back again. So I count that as an honor and a privilege. It's a real blessing to speak with you all, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you all. So give us a call, 833-4-VALDEZ. And many of you who listen to this show know that in the morning, I like to get a nice cup of espresso. I take it with milk. It's called café con leche. In France, they call it café au lait. In Italy, I think they call it a latte. But it's that espresso with the steamed milk, and it's a fantastic way to start your day. And I go to a guy who is a Cuban exile that's now an American citizen, came here 20-some-odd years ago on the back of a jet ski, and now owns a small cafeteria, like a very small, I wouldn't call it quite a restaurant, but it's for the lack of a better word, like a bistro. And he and I were talking today, and he tells me, a relative of mine outside of Miami in Hialeah, Florida, tells me that they're paying something like $3,000 a month for a very small apartment. And he says, this stuff is out of control, the way rent is going and the way the cost of living is going. And I said, listen, we're still king over here in this part of the world, right? New York City area, the suburbs of New York City, the 5 boroughs, northern New Jersey. This is always going to be more expensive than the outskirts of a big city like Miami, which, again, very unaffordable, which is why I'm still here, because I'm looking for a place over there. It's got to make sense for me. Anyway, we're going back and forth, and he's telling me, I think it's more expensive over there. Even in the lesser desirable parts outside of Miami, it's more expensive. And I said, come on, it's not the case. But according to Shannon Thaler from the New York Post, Miami has topped New York City as the least affordable housing market after the pandemic boom. The surge of transplants to Florida since the pandemic has caused prices to skyrocket, sapping the Sunshine State of its main draw, affordability. Listen to this. According to Realty Hop, Housing's May Affordability Index, which compares home ownership costs relative to income, Miami is now the least affordable housing market in the United States. The median price for a home in Florida's big city is $585,000. To be able to afford this, homeowners can expect to spend as much as 79.9% of their monthly income on home ownership expenses. And that's according to Realty Hop. That tops the amount paid by homeowners in Los Angeles, which is 77.5, and Newark, New Jersey, which is 72.4, and New York City, which is 70.6. So just get that right. It's more expensive per percentage-wise to live in Newark, New Jersey than it is in New York City. Now, again, that's if you believe Realty Hop and their methodology for coming up with this. But coming in at number 5 on the list was another Florida city, Hialeah, located about 12 miles northwest of Miami at 65.79%, according to this report. So I say somebody in Hialeah that owns a lot of property, maybe a real estate investment trust or a group of investors said, let's build some nice stuff in Hialeah. It'll be more affordable. It's only 65% of one's economic situation that's going to be required to live here. So let's do that, and we'll put it into this report, and maybe people will start buying here a little bit more than they're buying in Miami and the outskirts of Miami. I don't know. Maybe I'm onto something, maybe not. But that's what this report says. Now, I want to go to you guys. I don't know if you buy it, if you don't buy it. We're talking about everything from China to RFK Jr. to any of the stories we've talked about on the program and anything else that's on your mind. Let us start with George in Topeka, Kansas. KMAJ. George, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hey, sir. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hey, so I've got two questions, one on the left, one on the right for you. Would you really rather have me prioritize?
I don't care. Go for it.
Rapid fire. Okay, so as far as RFK goes, I like the guy, so I'm a libertarian. I like him. I can't say I love him. I believe a lot what he's saying. I do find it a little curious, the timing, and it makes me wonder if a lot of Biden supporters have secretly dropped on him and they're supporting him. I'd like to know where a lot of that funding is coming from, because he kind of came out of nowhere.
Well, so just to speak to that, I mean, generally, a year and a half, 6 months out from a presidential election, you're going to find lots of candidates that are coming out of nowhere. This is the time to proverbially throw your hat in the ring. And when you are a Kennedy, A, you come from money, and B, you're a candidate. So you're going to be fundraising. I can't imagine that there's not a group of Democrats out there that's thinking, we don't like Biden. Let's send him a message by putting a little bit of energy into this Kennedy campaign, if for nothing else, just to get his attention so that they could say, hey, look, you know what? You know how he got that little jump in the polls there? That was because we put together a PAC, and our PAC raised $10 million, and we're already reaping the rewards of that. Now, you could easily get on board, Joe Biden, if you jump on board with our special interest, and we can forget about him. This is how politics works, right? It's always about raising money and organizing people. Those are the two goals of how it works, and it seems like they're definitely doing things. So I don't think the timing is so curious, because I think this is when you do that. Now, if the thought is, why now and not in the past? No, that's, I guess, a valid question. But again, I would think it's Joe Biden, right? I think, people, all sorts of people, I think, are considering a run for president because there's very limited bench on the Democrat side. There's very limited interest. And even people that aren't on the bench, some people say Gavin Newsom. He's not a great candidate. So I think if there were ever a time to try to get behind somebody and see something that isn't there, RFK is probably the guy, George.
Okay. Now, as far as on the right, Trump, I'm going under the assumption that Trump will be the Republican nominee. I'm very curious on the vice president nominee. Do you feel like he is going to pick somebody that's going to help him win, or somebody that's going to have a better chance at keeping a president in the Republican Party after he wins? Because a few names that pop into my mind, Ted Cruz, who I feel like would be a great vice, but you're taking him away from the Senate. Ramaswamy's young. The Libertarian Party, where I'm at, I'm a Rand Paul guy. Sure. Tim Scott, I really like Tim Scott. Do you feel like some of these people are in it to just be the vice president?
Here's what I think, George. I think that all of these guys are hoping that their campaign will take off, and that what they see in the mirror every day, everybody else will see. And lamentably, that doesn't always happen for most candidates, right? Most candidates start off thinking, man, I'm the best candidate because of X, Y, and Z. But they're never able to articulate that message to enough people because of money and time and their own ability to craft messaging that's that effective and that succinct, or to overcome the rest of the noise, right? Especially if you're running against a guy like Donald Trump. Now, with respect to all the guys you mentioned, I don't think Tim Scott is running for vice president. I think Tim Scott wants to be president. I do believe that Tim Scott is a realist, and he's politically savvy. He's a United States senator. So he realizes that that may be an option, and it's a plan B that he may be open to. And I think Ramaswamy, same thing. I think he'd love to be president. And if not, maybe he would consider a VP spot. I think that's the case for a lot of people, that they'd be open to it. Now, some of the people you mentioned, like Ted Cruz, I don't think Ted Cruz is anybody's VP material. I don't think Governor DeSantis is anybody's VP material. I think these guys are they're trying to be the guy, right? And that's what they want to be, and that's, if they work at it enough, they will be, right? I mean, me personally, I think Cruz is great at everything he's doing, and he'd be great as, honestly, I'd love to see Ted Cruz on the Supreme Court with a lifetime appointment. He's a young man. He's a brilliant legal theorist. I think he'd be great. But that's not something I think he wants to do. I think he'd like to be president one day, and he's willing to, pay the political price that you have to pay to get there, time and keep building. And he's certainly building. So I think that's the case there. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know if Trump cinches the nomination. It seems to me that he's well poised to do it, considering there's a new poll out, I think a day ago, that says that statistically speaking, Trump and Biden are tied. 48 Biden, 44 Trump, and it's within the margin of error of 4 points. And Jonathan Karl from ABC This Week, he was shocked that it was that close, considering the entire poll was conducted after Trump was indicted and after all of the barrage of cast of characters that they have out there that are out there trashing him. So I think Americans are tired of Biden, and they're also looking past Trump's alleged transgressions, because they realize this is likely a politicized prosecution. Anyway, that's my cue to take a pause. But George, great questions. Thank you for your call. Big shout out to everybody in Kansas on KMAJ. Your calls and more coming up. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Taking your calls on everything that we've discussed tonight, and we've got lots of topics on the table. We're talking about Taiwan. We're talking about spying. We're talking about, of course, everything going on in the United States, or as I like to say, America at Night. Let's go to Michigan, check in with Kim, who's listening online. Go right ahead, Kim.
Hi, Rich.
Hey.
I'm calling. I think you talked about this on Friday, but I just read the story today about the Penn State College professor, and he had caught in that predicament.
What a weirdo. He was messing around with his own dog.
I know, in a park, and he was running naked except for a mask and hiking boots and a backpack. And
Yeah, but that was in his house. The stuff he did in public is what he got caught for.
He did it in public, and he would run naked in this Pennsylvania park system, and they put up trail cams, the conservation officers did. And they caught him by tracking down his license plate from the parking lot, because nobody could identify him because he wore a mask and would run naked with hiking boots. And then he would stop here, and then they caught him masturbating on camera. And then they actually caught him, I guess, on camera, having relations with his poor collie dog. And I'll tell you,
Absolutely insane.
I know. And that poor dog. And he's been doing this. When they came to his house, he's begged the 2 conservation officers to shoot him. He said, my life is over. He said, I've been doing this for 10 years. He said, it's how I release tension.
Yeah, he said he was blowing off steam. Again, and just so everybody knows, this is Professor Themis Matsoukas, a professor of engineering at Penn State University, 64 years old. He was arrested and charged last week for allegedly being, for everything Kim just said, including relations with his own dog. I mean, absolutely crazy. And his quote, I do it to blow off steam. And you're right. He did ask the cops to blow him away. And I mean, I don't envy this guy, right? I don't want to be in his shoes. I'm glad I'm not in his shoes. He's in rough shape. And, whatever happens, happens, right? I mean, he dug this hole for himself.
Yeah. And can I say one thing about why Blinken got treated so bad in China?
Yeah, quickly.
Okay, quickly. The reason he's getting treated bad and Biden's getting treated bad is the whole world knows that China, Russia, and Ukraine have the whole Biden family by the short ones. And we all know it. The world knows it. That's why Biden and Blinken and Biden, Blinken, and stupid are getting treated like that. Do you agree?
Yeah, it definitely seems to me like these guys are compromised. They're incredibly sympathetic to what China's doing. Again, Biden has always taken a very dismissive approach against anything that they do that, in my opinion, is egregious, like killing people because of their faith or because of where they live in China, like the Uyghur Muslims in the region or country formerly known as Turkmenistan, where they came from. I mean, the whole thing is out of control. And I feel like Blinken is just doing as he's told. Biden is doing as he's told. And they're doing exactly as they want to do while making us look incredibly weak throughout. And it's really a shame. It really, really is. I hate to see our country in this shape because I think, in my lifetime, I've seen us be tough. I've seen us be strong. I've seen us be on top. And we're none of those things right now. Kim, thank you for the call. I do appreciate it. Let's go to Jane, Clifton Park, New York. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. How are you?
Hey, Jane.
I just want to mention something kind of off that center.
Yeah, quickly, because we're down to the wire.
Okay. Oh, okay. Jill Biden, how in the world does a woman sit back, a woman with any decency, and watch what is happening to her husband?
Yeah, interesting point. You're right. A lot of people say she should be brought up on charges of elder abuse because, she's. But the thing is, I don't believe that Joe Biden's totally clueless. I do believe he gets lost and he's past his prime for sure. But one thing he knows how to do is be a crooked politician. He could do it in his sleep, and she's helping him. She's the accomplice. Jane, thanks for the call. We're coming right back.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue at Open Phone America. We're going to go to Boise, Idaho, check in with our friend Paul, KBOI. Paul, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. Yeah,
yes, sir.
Blinken's going to make it back to the States tonight if he's not already here. But the thing that comes to mind is a newsreel that showed Neville Chamberlain with a piece of paper in his hand, and he's all smiles as he gets off the airplane in 1938 because he got Adolf Hitler's signature on that piece of paper saying that he wouldn't go to war with the United Kingdom. I think we all know how that turned out.
Yeah. I hope that's not the case, but I think that's right in many ways, right? I do believe that Biden's goal in life is to just subsist with China. It's not to weaken them. It's not to slow them down. It's not to compete. It's not to be an adversary. It's just simply to, can't we all just get along and just coexist? And I think that weak mentality benefits him because of whatever financial arrangements he has. And that's fine. But I think it's not good for the country, obviously. And this is ultimately going to hurt us, Paul. And it's hurting us as we speak.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I have friends in the conspiracy theorist community, and all weekend long they were sending me different clips of, look to me like National Guard drills and things like that. But, what they turned it into was, massive military mobilization. China's coming to get us. And I just thought, I don't think China's coming to get us. I don't think they want a hot war. They're doing so well with their new version of a Cold War and what they call unrestricted warfare, where they have so many, like the old saying, there's so many ways to skin a cat. They are skinning this cat so many ways, from the investment that they have in the United States, that we're kind of so attached at the hip, to their influence and involvement in higher education. And as we can obviously see, the amount of sway they have over American politicians. You look at Jamie Raskin, you look at Eric Swalwell, you look at Joe Biden, so many influential politicians that just turn a blind eye to everything going on with China. And it makes you just really question how much, right? How much have you been able to earn? And, what is the price? I know there's a lot of people that say everybody has a price, and that may be true. But, I mean, it seems to be the handful of suspects all the time, the same usual suspects. And it's a shame, Paul.
Well, Biden happened to get that $1 billion loan, interest-free loan. And it's funny, I don't think he ever got the paid taxes on that. I think that money is still in Chinese banks where it's not going to get touched.
Let me tell you, if that's the case, I'm pretty sure he's going to get in trouble for that, because a lot of people feel that Hunter Biden is going to eventually be indicted on tax evasion and possibly on a violation related to his inappropriate procurement of a gun license. I don't know what that means for him to get indicted. If it has the effect that it's had on Trump, Hunter Biden can run for president. Right? I don't think it's going to deter. I think Biden will easily turn around and say, my son Hunter's the smartest guy I know, but he made a mistake. Come on. Ice cream. Texas. Jill, my sister. He made a mistake. Come on. And once he just does a bunch of these incoherent statements, the kid's an addict. He made a mistake. And it'll just be sympathy, and they'll downplay it, and nobody will ask any serious questions, maybe except for, a few people on talk radio. And, of course, Peter Doocy in the press corps. And that's it. And it'll be a 1 or 2 day thing, and it'll continue to go right along the way they like it to go along. But that's ultimately how I see it. Anyway, we will continue. Paul, thank you for the call. Boise, Idaho, KBOI. Big shout out to everybody out there. Let's go now a little bit further south. Let's go to South Carolina. Check in with WTMA and our buddy Robert in Charleston. Go right for it. Go ahead.
Okay, Rich, I just wanted to say something about the GPS system, but before I get to it, I just heard you talk about Neville Chamberlain. Actually, if it weren't for Neville Chamberlain, Hitler could have won the war, because when Neville Chamberlain gave Hitler the Sudetenland, that delayed the hot war for a whole year, and Hitler got distracted a little bit during that whole year. And
just to correct the record, I wasn't talking about Neville Chamberlain. Somebody called in and spoke about Neville Chamberlain. But point taken. Let us talk about this GPS. I'm curious. You're talking about a GPS for tracking children. Tell me about it.
Yes, Yes, exactly. Remember last time we talked? It was maybe a couple of weeks ago. I suggested to you that you could put actually GPS devices in the heels of small children's shoes, so that they could be found. And then you said, "Oh, I don't think we want to have that." But then I thought to myself, maybe you were concerned about the RF that would be coming out in the radio frequency. But actually, they could be turned on. Those devices could be turned on remotely, and therefore there would be no RF coming out unless, of course, you needed it in order to find the child. So that could be done. I just thought I'd better let you know about that.
Yeah, no, and honestly, my concern about that's not really RF. It's more practicality, because little kids, their feet grow very quickly, and then you have to change the shoe very often. Now, if it's like a AirTag tag or something like that you would be putting in the shoe in some clandestine way, then that's an interesting thing. People might want to put it in a backpack. I can tell you, I mean, most people use a very popular application. I think it's called Life 360, and you're able to track all sorts of things. As long as your kid has the one thing they can't live without, their cell phone. It tracks their cell phone. It shows you how fast they're going, where they're located, and it's rather effective. And if you pay more every month, you get more features out of it. So those things kind of exist, but little kids, I think, might lose their phones more often than not, and that's one way. And the other thing is, obviously, if they're ever kidnapped, God forbid, somebody might take their phone immediately and just throw it in the sewer, and then you're done, which is where having the tracker on their person somehow would be helpful. I just think a lot of people would take exception to obviously putting a chip in their kid. I would never recommend that, the way people do it with their dogs. And on the flip side of that, it's a good topic, Robert. Honestly, I would never have wanted to do that to my kids, but I'm wondering what people think of that today, and maybe we should do an open phones on that tonight or tomorrow or something. Find out would you microchip your kid if you were, if you needed to know where they were. I would not, but I'd love to know. Thank you for bringing it up. I appreciate it. And for your other comments as well on World War II. All right, big shout out to Robert in Charleston, South Carolina, WTMA. We're coming right back with more calls on the economy and more. Plus, talking about dogs, I have a dog story that I don't think I've shared on the air yet. I think I told Mr. Hinton in the control room, but a very funny dog story that happened to me last week, so I'll share that with you. And plus, I'll give you a little bit of what happened with Father's Day as well. More to come straight ahead. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
And we continue with your calls. I just wanted to give you an update here on, let me see, there's more stores leaving San Francisco. AT&T has now announced they're taking their flagship store and they're closing it down because things are just too crazy in San Francisco. This is the place where the cops once told people, listen, you don't want your windows to get broken? Take everything out of your car, leave the windows open. If the windows are open, they won't break them. This is what they told them. And that was a couple of years ago. And also, I don't have anything to report on this missing submarine that used to go sightseeing around the Titanic, but apparently there's an entire submarine that's missing. So Godspeed to all of them. I hope they find it. I don't know what's going on. Looking to find an expert, but I don't know if I should call like a psychic medium or somebody that was like an admiral on a ship to give us a walkthrough on that. This is a tough one. But anyway, I want to continue with your calls. Pam has been patiently holding. Bethany, Missouri, listening online. Pam, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Hi. I wanted to tell you I'm concerned about this digital dollar. It's supposed to roll out in July. If you go to Fed 1, I think our government is keeping us looking in so many directions, the things that they want to push on us. Have you heard of the environmental social government?
Oh, yeah, the ESG. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
And Fed now, this is like the first step in making that marriage.
Then that means every one of us will have a digital ID. And I'm on Social Security. I'm 72 years old. And that is what I live on, is Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a concern. And I think they got us looking at all these other things. And even poor Trump, he can't even get a lawyer because they threaten anybody that will go. It's almost like they have a hit out on anybody that will help him.
You make so many good points. Just to talk about the Trump part before we talk about the digital dollar, the CBDC. With respect to Trump, I was looking at the big stories of the day this morning at different news outlets. And a couple of outlets were talking about this missing submarine. All the rest of the major news outlets were talking about Trump in one capacity or another. And I don't remember if it was the USA Today, but I think it might have been, or MSNBC, one of the two. At the time that I went, their number one story at the top of their headlines was, will there still be enough time to hold Trump's lawyers accountable? And it had a picture of Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor. And I thought to myself, what is going on here? Why is a story that's, I don't know, at least 18 months old, or at least that, of Rudy Giuliani being raided and all for his involvement with being Trump's lawyer, which again was a very horrible violation of due process rights in the Constitution. But all that aside, why is that the number one story on a Monday when Blinken is in China? And there's many things to report on. Not will we be able to hold Trump's lawyers accountable? And of course, that's a testament to how crooked the media actually is. But moreover, the overarching point here, Pam, for me, is that they just absolutely love this stuff. They love to talk about Trump and going after the bad guy. So I think you're right on that. They will not give him a fair break. They want to go after every lawyer. They want to make an example of those lawyers. And they want the world to see, look, if you think that you could be popular and be a good lawyer and you want to defend Trump, we'll destroy you the same way we've been working diligently to destroy America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, a great patriot who's great at what he does. And they try to make him look as bad as possible. So I think you're right on that. Now, back to this digital dollar, the central bank digital currency. And of course, this is how they do everything, right? The government loves to sneak things through the cracks, Pam. So what they do is they will launch this in a very innocuous way. They'll say, look, we're not imposing this on the people. This is going to be just for banking institutions. It's only going to be allowed for those in for the Federal Reserve and the certified participants that are banks already, and for us to exchange money amongst each other. And they'll do that as a pilot program for a little while until everybody seems like, oh, all right, I'm okay with it. And then they'll say, we want to roll this out for the people. Now, I believe that they're going to need Congress on board, and I don't know that they're going to have Congress on board. So I think this is the time to make noise. But it's fascinating how I know they're going to say, critics of the digital dollar are going to say that it's this, that, and the other. But in fact, it's not. And because it's not available yet to the public, so they're going to use that to their advantage to try and misinform and disinform people. But you were correct when you said, the way that you're living right now, you're living off of Social Security. There's a lot of Americans doing the same thing. I know my dad did before he passed away. That was a big part of his monthly income. And it's important to so many Americans. And to think that your position on things might be scored because of the environmental social governance score, the ESG score, and that your digital dollars could be turned off or turned on or only allowed to be used a certain way because the control of those dollars is with the government is a scary thought. and one that should never happen in America beyond where it is now. And if we're smart, we'll get our members of Congress to act to make sure that they can't even use it amongst the Federal Reserve and amongst the participating banks. I think that's something that needs to stop now before they try to put it on we the people, Pam.
I just didn't want people to have this happen and not know it is going to happen, because they could really mess a lot of people up, controlling us and taking away our Second Amendments, and and I think Congress isn't even aware of a shadow government. We got one, and they do want to take over. And it's sad, but I know Jesus is coming back.
Well, thank God for that. Oh, you bet, Pam. It's my pleasure to talk to you. And I say, cheer up. Don't feel too badly about it. I think that there's a lot of fight left in this dog and many other great Americans that are out there, that we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that this doesn't happen. Thanks for the call, Pam. Big shout out to everybody in Bethany, Missouri. And we're going to continue with your calls and my commentary, and we're going to wrap this thing up straight ahead. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And the battle for power continues. And by power, I mean, who's in charge of anything anymore, right? We've got our representatives and senators holding people accountable in hearings, and the people they're holding accountable seem to just be clueless. And again, many of them playing dumb, right? They're doing exactly what they want to do, like leaving the back door open while saying, oh my gosh, people keep coming into the country. Well, of course, that's what's going to happen if you don't really secure the border, and you say the border is secure, but then you send 1,000 troops down there. And then we got video of some of those troops opening up doors in the gate and letting people right in, creating an app to allow people to come right into the country. And Senator Rand Paul was ripping into Alejandro Mayorkas over disinformation being perpetuated by our own government. Listen to this.
Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem.
Ensure,
we can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
And this is part of the problem that we have, right? When they created that disinformation governance board, that's why I say, look, we have to do what's right for us as Americans. And this is why I love talk radio, especially when you're live and national at night and you get to talk to people all over the country. It's because this program really is your, right? It's your program. It's your platform. And that's why I love speaking with you. So free speech lives here. Feel free to give us a call. Tonight is over, but tomorrow we'll be back at it. That's why I always say hasta la próxima. Until the next time, take care, good night, and God bless. And we're going to do it all over again tomorrow with some of the most amazing guests you've ever heard. And we're going to cover all of the hot stories. So don't go anywhere, because there's more on this station.